Day 1. I awoke in the green fields. I'd been sleeping on the floor, homeless. I had a motivation to get things in motion, so I began collecting rocks on the ground and desperately scavenging for any resources I possibly could. The world was full of danger, demonic entities, wild animals, everything was working in synergy against me. I journeyed to the nearby lake to collect some of the gravel and stone at its surface. This was to acquire flint. I also went foraging for leaves from bushes to break them down into sticks, the most humble of resources required to create some makeshift tools for myself. I made a flint knife, a blade that I used to pick nearby grass, and used for plant fiber to weave some string. Thirst was setting in. I could hear the howls of the wolves in the night and I was parched, my vision slowly waning, playing tricks on my mind and leaving me vulnerable to the dangers of the cover of night. With the resources I sourced, I created a flint hatchet. Day 2. My new tools let me fell some trees in the forest so I could use the lumber later to build a home. I also created a crafting bench so I could get to work, further fleshing out a structure to use as a tool shed. The rocks that I picked from the forest floor let me form cobblestone, which I then used to create a stone pickaxe and a stone sword for some protection, as well as an improved stone axe. I began to carve out what would later become a mine directly below my abode, so I could find resources with less risk. This let me acquire some coal deposits. I carved some logs and used some of the wood from earlier to make a chest for storage, having collected an abundance of loot thus far. But I needed food to quell my hunger and set me up for later. So being the monster I was, I unfortunately had to slay some cows. But life as an adventurer was becoming lonesome. I used some bones to pet a wolf in the forest, an animal who would become man's best friend, my loyal pet, a dog that I would train and bring as my companion on my journeys, a much needed protector for the dangers of the forest. Day 3. The third day was for hunter-gathering. I made it my mission here to get more food, but I also stumbled into pixies of the forest, who would laugh and torment me from nearby, but I would of course attempt to put an end to their infestation in the woods. Day 4. But the pixies would follow me from the woods for revenge, entering my home. It was at times like this that I was thankful to have my dog. The woods are an unforgiving place of dark magics after all. I farmed some chickens for meat, feathers and eggs, carefully trying to keep out of the shadows of the forest where a lack of darkness presented increased danger. Skeleton skull idols and strange insidious decorations I witnessed put a chilling feeling in my spine, all littered throughout the forest in the open fields. I would make sure to stay hydrated though, as the thirstier I became, the more my vision lacked. Any deeper and I would probably go into psychosis, which perhaps explained my mass slaying of pigs after the fact. This was my first experience seeking out a mossy tower in the forest edge, a seemingly abandoned structure that ended up housing spiders, zombies and various other monstrosities, but a ton of loot nonetheless. I went from floor to floor, cleaning out the enemies, breaking their spawners and stacking up my loot exponentially faster than before, perhaps my quickest sum of progression thus far. From leather to chainmail, I found such a heavy accumulation of goods seemingly quickly, but these towers were no breeze. They were flooded with beasts from top to bottom. Now, I underestimated how much of a godsend this place was. I sourced diamond gear insanely early on in my adventure, which would make things a little bit easier. Day 5. I returned with my spoils of war, feeding my chests a healthy flurry of goods. I had diamond, iron and leather armor by this point, a nice mix and match of fashion. With my newfound goods and riches, I assigned much of the time of this day to strip down wooden logs, break down some of my ore veins into blocks of ore, and other monotonous tasks. I also made it a key task to expand out my base to upscale my new life in the forest, making my house slightly more impressive. However, alas, I was ambushed in the dark by a bird of terror from the skies, attempting to eliminate me and starve me of my newfound progress. And it wasn't alone. I of course made quick work of these predators. I had to send a message that I was not to be messed with. The weak fear the strong after all. I also made a bed. I could now sleep during the night and sleep through all of the potential threats. A shortcut of course, although it wouldn't wipe away nightmares of what I'd seen. Day 6. I advanced some of my skills, becoming more adept by this point due to my experience. My sword skills were fair, but one thing I was lacking was defense, and my blocking skills with a sword were my weakness. I crafted a shield, something that would hopefully come in use if I was attacked once more, which momentarily I was by invading foes, more magical enemies that raided my base. I had to fix the weak points in my house to prevent this from happening again. Now I knew some of these mystical creatures could negate all physical limitations of blocks and barricades, and teleport through walls, not something with an easy solution however. I made some paper from sugarcane I had acquired, and some wooden slabs, and made them into a matchbox. This would be useful for making torches, as well as creating creating a campfire that I could use as a light source for the nighttime darkness. After all, the darkness attracts some less than stellar company. Also, lesson learnt the hard way: don't walk onto an open flame or fire pit. Thank me later. Day 7. I made some more storage containers in my new extension. I was gathering more and more loot, a lot of it meaningless, and sorting wasn't something I'd even bothered to do yet, not something I'd recommend. I continued my mining efforts, finding some better ores this time, like iron. I found myself in a deep, seemingly never-ending cave system, and nothing could go wrong here, right? It seemed like I'd already hit the jackpot when already finding diamond, so this seemed fruitless. I also cooked some of food in my furnace, so hopefully I'd not have to slay as many animals. I smelted much of my iron into some extra backup tools to use for later. I was stumbling upon a vast number of resources like iron that it just seemed almost repetitive at this point, but when things get quiet, it's always spoiled, sometimes by huge floating rock monsters underground. Relatable, right? No? Okay. I was beginning to realize if you want to have fun, don't go into a deep dark cave. It's not exactly free of danger, in fact it's full of it. Day 8. Well, on this day I discovered chupacabras are real, another thing apparently lurking underground. Remember how I said I needed to improve the weak points of my house? Well, apparently leaving open spaces to fill in with glass later is not exactly the best of ideas, because velociraptors, floating phantoms and ghouls, and other terrifying beings just walk up on in there like they were invited in. And yeah, it doesn't usually end so well. Day 9. Also, apparently nighttime brings about demonic evil chickens that try to kill you too. Who would have thought? Wandering around in the early morning under the cover of darkness in a blood moon is not the smartest thing someone with a moderate to high IQ would be expected to do. But there was a beautiful aurora borealis, so I couldn't help myself. But the army of zombies weren't very forgiving. Anyways, can we take a moment to appreciate how unrealistically accurate those skeletons are? I'm gonna call aimbot on that one. Somehow I fled and I found some amazing underwater base, totally abandoned too, just like those faction bases that always seem to get raided on PvP servers. There was some pretty basic farms and resources in here, but I'm not complaining. Free stuff for me. Also, they had some strange affinity for books. Enchantment books were cool and all, but I'm talking mostly empty books. At this point, just get a library or, well, I guess Kindles don't exist in Minecraft. In hindsight, I probably should have just converted this base. It was much safer than mine was, a fact that would ring true as I was basically assaulted as soon as I emerged from the water after leaving, being attacked by a starved dinosaur and murderous crab. Whoopee. However, things started to look up. I meandered my way into some abandoned barn. Sure, it was rough around the edges, smashed out windows, broken floors, the general damage done by youth and delinquents, but after watching enough DIY videos on YouTube, I decided it was a home project I was willing to see through. This would be my base for the long term, after a few repairs of course. Day 10, I vanquished some zombies, slayed some poor sheep for more wool, and generally was a madman, taking advantage of everything Mother Nature so graciously presented to me. Day 11. I spent most of my time deforesting the woods. Probably not my most gracious action for the planet, but I was realizing OCD probably was a real thing, as the second floor of the building and its roof proportion was truly horrendous and it needed patching up. I mean, really, it was not good. Day 12. I found some spooky pumpkins in the forest. Bit too late, Halloween has been and gone now, but I thought it was worth the mention. I guess jack-o'-lanterns are a bad omen because an arrow hit me seemingly from nowhere after I broke them. Pesky skeletons. I worked on the roof, which is dangerous without scaffolding, not to mention mine was actually made out of gravel. Probably not the safest. It's like making a ladder out of sand and using it to clean the windows on a skyscraper. Don't expect to not fall down 50 stories. Day 13. My attic room was now looking rather homely, quite like my real old bedroom. I found some clusters of ore in the woods in a ball of rock. Quite an interesting accumulation actually. I have to admit I was pretty cruel to the pigs again on day 13. I also stole all their crops from their farm. For some reason there was a lot of these abandoned bases and farms around. I was starting to think I was living in some kind of a simulation, or like real life was an abandoned server. Or maybe I was just playing on some multiplayer game. Who knows? Inception. Day 14. With more deforesting efforts for seemingly no reason at all but destroying the planet, my wolf and I went through the forest getting some lumber, cutting it pretty close to some dinosaurs along the way. Is that a diplodocus? I think so. It blends in like a chameleon anyway. After nightfall, I journeyed into the four walls of another tower, this time a spooky, mossy covered cobblestone tower to the skies. full of poisonous, creepy spiders and menacing skeletons, stopping me from reaping its rewards. But I wouldn't give up, not yet. Day 15. Back in my base, I smelted much of the iron I'd gathered in my new furnace setup I constructed. I prepared some other items and utilities and crafted some specialities and some iron tools and combined them with my master craftsman skills and knowledge to create the Paxel, a super tool that combined multiple abilities from the prepared toolset, but I would need another piece to complete this process. I also crafted some wooden hardware and combined them all together to create the Lesser Equipment Forge, a block which I used to craft my pre-prepared parts in to create my first special tool, which was the Paxel. After the usual pig-fueled carnage, I ascended a cool looking tower that I found straight in the middle of the plains in a field. It looked just like one of those observatory towers with the space telescopes at the top. It was pretty awesome. Why do I keep skipping over these cool bases that are already half built for me? I don't know either. After leaving, I was ambushed by a disgustingly large tentacled set of red monsters outside of a sandstone structure. Of course, I did enter, ignoring my better judgment, descending into the deep dark depths. Not always the best ideas, as I mentioned before. At its very bottom, at the foot of the winding staircase, was a dark brick built labyrinth system full of dangerous creatures. This place was a little smaller than expected though, but its pathways were confusing and narrow. At the top of a hill, I also found a gigantic pillager settlement, or so I thought. Another one of those abandoned civilizations that was shrouded in mystery, with chests full of cobwebs outside and old antique weapons such as bows, and an active open fire pit. Strange. However, inside, the actual structure was life. This huge manor was actually full of normal villagers, with a ton of useful offerings that I could take advantage of by bartering with them for trades. Of course, I decided chickens shouldn't be inside, so I had to discreetly take care of those little guys. I mean, who keeps a roost of chickens in their mansion anyway? If I'm entirely honest, I stole most of their stuff, like their note blocks and other assorted treasures, but we'll keep that on low for now. Day 16. I continued to ransack the villagers' manor, taking everything they had to offer. They won't need it anyway. I mean, they can't even protect their own village from monsters, and we already know the zombies outside. Day 17. After returning to my base with my pirate booty, I leveled up some of my skills to increase my proficiency and self-reliance. This gave me a bonus to my woodcutting and stone cutting skills and the harvesting speeds of them. I mined a ton of resources, mainly coal and iron, on the side of a giant mountain. The density of ores here was pretty immense. I had found some cool locations to save for later for resource gathering. I also found some steep, icy and snowy cliff faces, which I ascended to the top of, with dangerous monsters and creatures sitting atop their peaks. This was going to be a problem. After picking up the leftover pieces and regaining my composure, I slayed the beast and got back on my feet. I also found some emeralds on top of the mountain, right next to a stone brick graveyard. In the graveyard was some pretty poor loot, but the structure was cool nonetheless. Now, on top of the mountain, I found an abandoned cluster of chests, with precious heavy metals and loot pieces inside. But what had left over all this loot? I was sniped by a skeleton and I was getting colder and colder, covered in frost. But then I realized this would be the first time I would see a dragon, a legendary beast covered in dark blue scales. I had heard the tale of this dragon as a child, the blue drake named Dovahkiin. I knew what I had to do. My goal was to defeat the dragon. I cut my losses and took back the hardware that I'd acquired all the way back home. Day 18. I returned to the Winter Peaks and mined away the few emeralds I had found. They would perhaps be useful for trades at the village's stronghold if I was to revisit later. Nearby the dragon, I found the icy tower lair of its servants, full of skeletons and huge zombies and monstrosities. After getting some stronger gear, I revisited the icy tower, making sure I did not enrage Dovahkiin enough to dispatch of me himself. That was a fight I would perhaps take later, at a point where I was more powerful than I was right now. I was now sporting a set of newly acquired silver-plated armor, more fitting for a werewolf slayer, complemented by chainmail. This meant I could withstand much of what this tower would throw at me, but poisonous spiders lingered inside, and outside the tower, Dovahkiin swooped around, hovering above, looming over me menacingly and protecting his roost. Day 19. I began to carve a whole collection of oak wood logs in the attic of my house. Being a lumberjack was apparently my new forte. I created a brand new wooden shield with my crafting crafting table and with the many iron bars that I had smelted. I created an iron tower shield, a powerful piece, and it looked amazing with my new silver armor. Now I felt like a hero. It was time to conquer the world. After hiking back up the cliffs, perhaps I had become too overly confident. I used my bow and arrows to snipe at Dovahkiin from the skies, using the glass tower of ice as my protection, but in a foolhardy front, underestimated my legendary foe. He smashed the walls to smithereens. I tried to seek salvation in a stone tower, but to no avail. I was slain in battle. But this would not be my first attempt. I gathered some sugarcane at a nearby pond by some cattail plants, so I could use it for paper or a farm or whatever I needed to later. I also found a sweet looking house, not inhabited of course. Perhaps they were out on a hunting trip, but finders keepers I guess. I decided to uproot most of their floor, steal all their possessions, destroy all their valuables, and just generally be ruthless, disrespecting them even more by leaving 3/4 of their broken house left over for them to find. I did exactly the same thing to another house that I found moments after, except this one had no loot inside, so I got quickly bored of it and decided to take out my anger on their pet pig. Sorry little guy. It became kind of apparent to me this whole pig slaying thing is going to be a recurring theme throughout the retelling of this adventure. It seems everywhere I went I picked on poor piggies. In the middle of the plains I found some more buildings, but the stone tower was what piqued my interest the most. When I broke inside I immediately knew what it was. I was all too familiar with those same winding staircases. It was a dungeon. The roof however was extremely useful to get me some more torches. By nightfall I broke into another poor adventurer's house, smashing into it through their glass windows and plundering their house in a fashion likened to Genghis Khan or Attila the Hun. Day 20. Day 20 opened with the fresh smell of bacon after slaying the pigs. Typical. I found an opening in a forest. Turned out it was a well and I fell straight down it. I felt like one of those princesses who slips down a well in a fantasy story. Luckily there was no creature down there like there is in horror movies though. I also found something called a violet eyewig in the forest, a disgusting creature that poisoned, weakened, slowed and blinded me. It killed me of course. I guess I could liken that to being a war moth or a BTEC spider. Sometime later I came across another abandoned structure surrounded by a cemetery. Turned out to be a damaged monastery. I had no clue how old many of these buildings were or why they were left in such a state of disrepair, but it was exciting to explore them, except this one was flooded with water. It was useful for the typical construction materials, but pretty poor in other loot. And can we take a moment to consider how many item frames are just sitting in the water? The bell part of the bell tower was nice though, just for the iron block I guess, but was it really worth further desecrating a holy building for? Most definitely. For some reason slaying chickens gave me a whole bowl of karma after realizing one was possessed by Satan himself. A creepy black phantom that shoots purple fireballs came out of its corpse. Yikes. Not fighting that thing. Later. As I ran away, I came onto the edge of the sea. It looked beautiful as the sun was setting and all that could be seen was the night sky. There were strange floating altars, dotted islands and strange biomes on the sea. It was beautiful, yet I could see nothing due to the time. Day 21. I swam further out onto one of the mystical looking islands. It was full of purple chorus looking plants, with poisonous bushes and flowers on the ground, and mischievous looking multicolored crocodile creatures, which were neutral. I guess I was a bad guy for slaying them. After wading through some trees in the neighbouring forest and jungle, I found a crashed or abandoned hot air balloon in the water. Pretty cool, but I had no clue how to steer that thing. I also got ambushed by some mutant hippogriffs. A fight for another day. Choose your battles wisely. Back at home, I filled out my house with some further chests. I was getting so much loot and still falling into the bad habit of not sorting any of it, so I just needed somewhere to throw it in. Yes, I'm that guy on multiplayer. Deal with it. For some reason at night time, I decided to revisit the island. I wish I could tell you some legendary tale about dying graciously in battle to an army of Persian soldiers, but unfortunately I died to a prickly flower. Anyways, moving on. In the jungle there was a super cool tree house. I climbed up it onto its vines to see what was at the top. I swear there's one guy that's going around building all these and just getting bored of his bases. Either that or that weird mini tree man at the top that I killed actually owned the home. Oh well. I spent most of the nighttime hours on a huge massive rock, another gigantic accumulation of ores that I found. There's never any rare ores in these, but it's almost like some kind of outer space meteorite. Something or someone was blessing me from the skies above. Day 22. Within the vast cover of the jungle trees, I sat below amongst long forgotten Mayan temples with loot inside. I guess you can tell these guys were still in the Stone Age, right? Not exactly the best stuff inside there. The second temple was infested with annoying floating elementals, which made my job harder, blinding me in the darkness and making me walk across literally every booby trap to get cheap loot in the end at best. But then, I saw it. The mythical construct of the old tales. El Dorado, the lost city of gold. A beautiful coliseum with a lake and open goblets with fires illuminating the surrounding area. But it was dominated by flying serpent beasts of fantasy and other similar insidious creatures littered within its interior. If I had been of sound mind, perhaps I would have converted this city into my own domain, but it puts a chill through my spine. Perhaps I had been watching too many movies like From Dusk Till Dawn and thought it may be overtaken by lizard vampire people. Anyways, I guess I got bored quickly as it seemed foresting for melons outside of the city was more interesting to me. Perhaps being a melon farmer is in fact my true calling in life. By a large lake, I also got further revenge on those pixies for tormenting me at the start of my adventure, as one of them yet again ambushed me. The fast, but not fast enough. Haha, smell you later. As the sunset began to set once more, I found a beautiful biosphere sitting on the ocean. I had to admire such fine craftsmanship. Below it was some green toxic substance of some sort, maybe a kind of acid. I dreaded to think what that actually was. It reminded me of the radioactive waste at the power plant in The Simpsons. Day 23. I found another mossy cobblestone battle tower. Remember when those were hard? At this point I was pretty well geared with my current arraignment to find these kind of easy, but the holes in the ceilings always tend to frustrate me when a million monsters drop down on top of you. I'm not going to lie though, at any level skeletons are always deadly. If you know, you know. After many attempts and revisits, of course being wrong about how easy it would apparently be, I took on each floor, with some of them being absolutely littered and jam-packed full of enemies. If I didn't have a shield and some bandages, I don't know what I would do. One tip, always build a shield just to deflect arrows. Thank me later. And of course with skeletons, another hack is to make them hit each other and turn on each other. Okay, I feel evil now. After cheesing the Cyclops boss at the top by wall glitching and just trolling him, I must say it was pretty satisfying just to see the tower crumble piece by piece, especially when that SCP looking freak of a monster at the top got yeeted in the first blast. Drifting from one segment at a time and seeing all the loot drop, some going to waste, is extremely fulfilling. Day 24. I decided to dabble in my mystical side, tapping into my magical sense of self. I crafted a summoning staff to make use of the elemental creatures that the world has bestowed upon us, bending them to my will and advantage of course. This staff would let me summon different minions to help me in battle, which is pretty necessary when stuff gets tougher. I felt pretty awesome testing it for the first time, having these floating ice shield dudes following me around in an entourage everywhere. I felt like some kind of rap star rolling deep with 4 or 5 bodyguards. Using a compass and a crafted empty book, I created an antique atlas, a map book that I could use to gather navigational data on my world to use for directions later. And also if I died, I know my legendary story and explorer status would be kept alive for years to come. Day 25. Using a strange concoction of bones, gold bars and a diamond, I created an artifact called the Soul Gazer, a stone of sorts that basically lets me capture the souls of creatures to summon them later. Remember, being a powerful warrior is one thing, but being a warrior who can absorb and capture monsters just like Pokemon is a whole other ballgame, and I'm trying to collect the PSA 10 Charizard right here. Now, if we were going to slay Vodaving himself, we had to be equipped. Dealing with creatures from the skies and in the skies would require a legendary mount that could fly. My first best bet was taming a rock, a flying feathered bird usually found in plains and woodland, and I'd need a special food item to do this too to bend it to my will. This required many items like meat to create special avian bird treats to help me subdue it. Now was time to actually find one, which would be tough, but the hard part would be yet to come. The best bet was to wait for nightfall and just sit in the plains and wait to be attacked, or to see one hovering above. It took a long time, but surely I did see one, and with some persistence, it swooped to me and I fed it some treats to make it love me pretty quickly. But catching it whilst it was flying to actually board it was the tough part, and I guess the other bird was mad at me for taking his bird. Insert the Mr. Steal Your Girl meme here. Day 26. I have to say I did get a little carried away on this thing because I was outside my house and protecting it, rightly so, but no ground enemies can even touch you on one of these things. So the army of weird lion dinosaur hybrids were pretty easy to torment, which was kind of hilarious. But eventually something had to give, of course, just my luck. I got poisoned, be it from some arrow or from swooping too low, I don't know, but my bird died and I plunged to the ground and got eaten by the lions. Fun times. Back at base, I crafted the Soul Stone, an upgrade from my previous craftable that allowed me to not only bind animals as pets, but bind them to my soul and thus then actually be able to make them respawn if they died this time. So on that very night, as I waited in the dock, a magical trumpet skeleton shooting fireballs tickled my spirit, but then I killed him. I'm still kind of confused what that even meant. And by chance, another bird. I made it fall in love with me as I usually do, and this time it was bound forever. So next time I let it die, it should actually come back now. Now with bird armor on too, these things do look pretty epic. For some reason though, the other birds do always get jealous of us, and remember, being the alpha animal is always beating the competition. I just wish I didn't have to kill those birds all the time. Maybe this is how the dinosaurs actually got extinct, being jealous of the cool ones. Day 27. I thought I heard a knock on the door. Strange. I didn't exactly have many friends as I lived in the woods as a hermit, but no, they were just the local neighbors saying hello, or so I thought. It turned out to be some tree dudes trying to kill me. Suffice to say, it didn't end well for them, unfortunately, but they'd be back later. With my newly acquired mount, I decided to fly to the skies. With pure courage, shooting arrows at a dragon. This was my chance to train and defeat my first dragon. It wasn't Vodaving, but it was a fighting chance and the next best thing. But it took just one ice ball to drop me straight to my icy grave. I summoned my blue minions once more at home, testing them out. They absolutely eviscerated this one creature, slicing it apart like Gordon Ramsay cuts onions in the kitchen.
Where's the lamb sauce?
I say I have a chance versus a dragon with these guys by my side surely. After taking off again, I found this stone structure buried in the ground and descended into it through its opening above. The passageways were extremely tight in this place, just like they are in ancient Egyptian pyramids. There were booby traps linked to redstone blocks which I gathered, cobwebbed hallways and spider rooms. It was pretty dangerous. The thing I hate about spiders is that when they crawl on walls, they seriously start geeking and just deflecting all your hits like they're playing around to Spider-Man or something. It's kind of tough. I can't tell you how many medkits and plasters I actually used in this place to heal up. I think at this point I just need to be sponsored by Elastoplast. Day 28. Most of this day was spent skipping to each spawner room, cracking the spawners, slaying the spiders and zombies, and trying to navigate this harrowing structure, which was like a maze. On the night of this day, I was visited by a Reaper. The devil himself had sent one of his minions to ambush a holy man such as myself, and it worked. But apparently God loves me as I have the ability to respawn in this game, so take that, foul beast. Day 29. After exploring from the sky, I came across another dragon who breathed fire on me from above. Asaku was his name, a powerful fire dragon boss that nearly killed my precious bird companion. We had to land at a nearby house to recoup and recover and reacquire our strength. But this house had been damaged by the dragon. This dragon Asaku was plaguing the nearby city and camp. They had fled because of its torment. I slayed the abandoned farm animals who were ownerless, putting them out of their misery. Definitely not for food or my own personal gain, I'm of course too good of a man for that. I stole the citizens' bed and thieved their goods like a true plunderer. Nearby was another tower. These towers plagued most of the land, and it seemed that I was the only adventurer that could actually put a stop to these structures. Day 30. I made more chests downstairs in my house to fill with loot. My belongings were becoming so much that my attic room just simply was not enough anymore. Luckily, I had 2 floors. Soon I'll have to just live in the basement. Remember how I cheesed that first mob tower? Well, I'm guilty because I did that a second time. In fact, I baited the boss to the lower floor and just sniped him from above. Drastic times take drastic measures. Don't judge me. Oh, sweet, sweet loot. It's so nice that when there's no boss or enemies to actually cause your anxiety, you can just fleece them for everything they've got. Day 31. I found a cool little wizard's tower next to the mob tower I defeated the day prior. This place was a humble abode, but it had a roof made of lapis blocks, which are of particular value for me to gather. I also followed a rail down into an abandoned mineshaft underground. This place was perfect to gather a ton of ores. In the forest, I found an abandoned nether portal, encrusted with moss-covered stone around it. I broke down the stone cover to it and used the portal to get myself some obsidian to reconstruct it elsewhere. It seemed this portal had been covered, perhaps to stop the nether leaking out into the overworld. Day 32. On day 32, I was coasting the oceans on my bird and heard a sweet song, but the closer I came towards it, the more I lost control. It was pulling me below the water, and then it began to litter my vision blood pink and pull me directly towards a rock. These harlots were not as beautiful as their voice. Their eyes turned red and they turned murderously ferocious. Remember, beauty is sometimes on the inside. Anyways, I didn't feel so bad for killing them because of this. I flew up to a keep upon the water nearby, Surely the owners had been victims to the same mermaids that tried to poach me. Well, without an owner, it was my castle now, so I stole all their crops obviously. They also had some valuables like spears and other materials inside the castle. I broke all their bookshelves in their library. Across the seas was a skull and crossbones. Had I found the pirate ship of Blackbeard himself? This ghost ship drifted on the water. It seemed Blackbeard had finally succumbed to zombies, or maybe his crew were undead like the Black Pearls from Pirates of the Caribbean, because this boat was full of monsters. This ship had no wheel to steer it either. Strange. I dispatched of all remaining monsters and decided to dip on out there as water leaked into the ship's hull. A captain goes down with his ship, but technically I'm not the captain. Underwater was a gigantic sea serpent. This thing was doing backflips and barrel rolls and just generally diving out of the ocean. I definitely had to be careful of this guy. I don't think I was yet equipped to deal with that kind of acrobatics. Day 33. On the water, I also found this strange pirate town where it had end portal frames, strange little traders huts full of loot, and beds and chests. I found some pretty cool items and trinkets in some of them. One of these items was the broken heart that offered heart containers filled by sleeping that would serve as extra damage absorption. I equipped this thing, but sadly I got bitten by the serpent in midair when I wasn't paying attention. Another one bites the dust. After dealing with another battle tower, I returned back to my base. I set down an enchantment table and some bookshelves that I got from the pirate town and made myself an enchanting library area in my base to make my tools and weapons more powerful, first testing it out and enchanting my sword. I also equipped some rings and a tool belt on my trinket belt to improve my character's power. I put a backpack on the ground too for some extra storage. Day 34. I crafted some golden potion rings which I then paired with some of my other materials in order to craft some specialized rings of resistance. It was this stage of my journey I was focused on acquiring powerful and useful items to make myself stronger. I now was becoming stronger day by day. I next crafted an item called the Poison Stone, a graceful item that would give me bonuses not only to my dig speed but also my attack speed, making me swifter in both combat and taskmanship. Day 35. I invaded another distant mining camp. They had a few ores here, but more specifically some valuable blocks, like a full gold block kept behind some bars. Those guys really kept their most valuable possession locked up like Fort Knox. It's only gold anyway, sheesh. In fact, this particular camp wasn't even abandoned. Dr. Trearis over there apparently was living here. Shout out Diamond Minecart by the way. At night time I was yet attacked leading into the early morning. It was becoming obvious my neighbours didn't like me at this point. More tree men, but this time they also brought a dinosaur and some other amigos with them. I'm starting to think having Ned Flanders as my neighbour would pretty much be better. Day 36. The blood moon from the previous night lasted many hours stretching into the morning. It plagued my mind, negating any ability to even sleep. I had to just put up a fight and survive. I returned to a mansion that I'd found the previous night on the water. This mansion was shrouded by vines covering its doorways and halls. This wooded house had been strangled by Mother Nature and forgotten. It was truly enthralling to explore from top to bottom, but in here I found a brewing stand and some other useful hardware in its roof floor. Can we stop to mention how groovy this place looks with its pink carpet by the way? I found another gigantic villager manor. This one was guarded by an iron golem and had a similar number of inhabitants and traders to the one that I found some days prior. In similar fashion, I stole their jukebox and note blocks and any records that they had. I'm the reason we can't have nice things. Why villagers can't have nice things. These guys were a little richer, so it was nice to swindle them for everything they had. Remember, the rich get richer. Day 37. For some reason their iron golem murdered my bird for no apparent reason. Why? Now I don't feel so bad about robbing them in pure daylight, especially if they're going to do this. I found another battle tower, but this was like no other. In fact, it was buried deep underground, with most of its floors being damaged and littered with holes. This made them particularly dangerous as the predominant enemy was either a poison spider or a skeleton, so I could be sniped through the holes and spiders could drop on top of me through them above. It's safe to say this one was the hard one. One of the rooms that I fell into was bundled with so many zombies. It was almost impossible to actually break the spawners because I just kept getting hit. Luckily zombies are dumb, so I just baited them outside into my ice elementals and wasted them whilst they burnt in the daylight. But with the open holes in the wall and it turning nighttime, they would freely pour out of the tower to fight me. Without sunlight aiding me, I had no choice but to remake entry and try to eliminate as many as I possibly could. Day 38. On the next day I made some more progress. My bird also swooped down around to help me a little to kill some of the enemies. The great thing about the rock is that it can actually pick up annoying enemies like spiders, making it a little less difficult. Having like 20 poison spiders gang you at once isn't exactly the most fun thing to do on a Friday night, I have to say. Sometime later, I actually found a real village too, fully populated, and they'd done all the work for me and left me all their crops for free for the taking. At least that was my convenient excuse for stealing this time. Day 39. I flew right up to the top of the battle tower's spire. This time I was on my rock. I found a convenient new strategy of cheesing the boss fight. Instead of blocking the Cyclops behind a wall or knocking him down a floor, I just swooped around him in circles where his fireballs weren't fast enough to actually hit me. And then from there I just slowly sniped him with arrows. It didn't matter how much of a tantrum he threw, it was no use. This was the easiest way, plus it meant all the top floor loot was a lot easier to gather before it started to crumble. Unfortunately, most of the top tier items were lost in the subsequent blast, but I managed to pick a few of them up while I was on my mount, prioritizing the diamonds mainly. Later in the day, I stumbled upon a full skeleton in the woods. I landed and farmed it. This many bone blocks would be specifically useful for making bone meal or getting bones for taming, but yet another blood moon was rising, so I had to make haste. It was at this time of night that I also found an absolutely enormous city on the water, fully fleshed out with pirate ships and a dock. I couldn't see under the blanket of the red night, however. At home, I enchanted some of my diamond armor, particularly the leggings, and set away some new items for later. Day 40. The morning of the next day was spent just surviving the blood moon. I was lucky this wasn't hardcore. This is hardcore enough. If these zombies could break in my house, I would have been out of luck. Some of them could probably break the record for the 100-meter sprint because they were moving faster than Usain Bolt. I spent most of the daytime portion of this day crafting items, mostly the prerequisites for the Dragon's Eye artifact I was looking to obtain. This item would grant toggleable night vision, fire resistance, and X-ray for some materials and chests. It was great for loot and actually fighting dragons. Basically, I had almost all things for this apart from a skull of a dragon. Convenient. This could have been the Ender Dragon or any other dragon in the world. All the more reason to become a dragon slayer. My main goal was yet again returning to focus. Day 41. I took off once again to the skies, being headstrong enough to challenge the nameless ice dragon to another showdown. I couldn't let him cause terror above my home for much longer. Once more, I was struck by another ball of frost, being lucky enough this time to land upon a tree to make an escape. But not cutting my losses, I decided it fit to climb the mountain and try it out close quarters. My mistake. Being struck by the dragon this time at point blank range, and once more falling in battle. Today was not yet the day. Day 42. After picking myself back up and cutting my losses, I set out for adventure. Thinking I could avoid a dragon encounter, in fact I found myself run into another. I saw flames being breathed onto the distant meadows. It was a bronze drake. I summoned my minions and got my bow at the ready, but rest assured, it was chicken tonight. Babe, we're going to KFC. I went back sneakily to steal some of the dragon's gold piled upon its roost whilst it wasn't looking, taking some of its loot quickly before making my exit. I found a floating island structure sitting upon a stone brick foundry. It seemed like it was a house of some sorts. Was it another wizard's base? Regardless, I flew down below where waterfalls littered the crevice something had carved out. I found a block of diamonds here. Maybe it was powering some magic, but being the magpie I was, I just took it. Ask questions later kind of thing. On top of the islands there were jack-o'-lanterns and trees and sugarcane by a man-made lake which acted as a cover to hide the base in a Thunderbird's mountain kind of way. Now, when there's a party there's always someone to ruin the fun. A hippogriff. Another jealous bird tried to break my bond with my rock. Well, that ended badly. Moments later, I found a grand wooden structure trailing up to the sky, a magical carved out tree, and inside was vines, crops, and an endless pillar to the top. This was a beautiful structure. Personally, I feel like the owner didn't even consider what would happen if someone just lit it up with a flint and tinder though. In the dock by the ocean, I found a bronze drake once more. Perhaps it was the same dragon or another foe. I tried to put my golem fighting strategy into place by trying to duke him, but he got angry and just sprayed me with his flames like a flamethrower. It didn't matter how many items I had to protect myself, it still wasn't enough. And as much as I love my pet, she was still kind of weak. Day 43. I crafted blaze cream and some glass bottles and filled them in the river and concocted them together with some blaze powder as an accelerant in a brewing stand to make some potions. These potions were so I had some kind of additional buff in combat. Once I'd done dilly-dallying, I had a potion of strength and a bunch of fire resistance potions. This would compound upon my trinkets in a layering effect, so I could hopefully withstand dragon attacks a bit better. I also required a stronger ranged weapon. I set my sights on the diamond strengthened longbow, which shouldn't be too much of a challenge to craft. I crafted the bow from a bunch of diamonds and craftables. Day 44. Now, I wouldn't always recommend anyone to go out at night, especially not to sneak out, but I did that and I decided it fit to fly to the local ice drake pest to crack another try with my boys. But I changed my mind kind of quickly on that one. I actually returned once again to the bronze dragon at the base. Still quite vengeful, but even though my sparkly new bow was more powerful, my pet was still not up to expectations because I got knocked off and fell to my death again. I slurped on some sweet potions of nectar, and it was at that moment, as the ground burst in flames and I fell, I would make my final shots, being eaten whole by a velociraptor. Now, just like clockwork, I snuck into the dragon's roost. The gold was everywhere, but there in the water was a huge dark-scaled beast. Had one of my arrows hit him before I fell in battle, or had something else defeated it? My first dragon slayed. I felt triumphant, but also regretful. What an immense creature. I harvested the dragon's skeleton as its body decayed, taking its bones to use for later. Now I had the dragon skull I had so desperately tried to acquire. The dragon's eye trinket was now a possibility. After creating some prerequisites, I finally crafted the beautiful dragon's eye itself. Now I had night vision, fire resistance, and bonuses to my attack speed. This was the one missing piece that would make dragon slaying a little less of a challenge. I also equipped my mount with some new diamond pet armor. It now looked truly epic, and perhaps it wouldn't actually die as much now. It's time to test. Perhaps I shouldn't have bullied that big tree guy, but it had to be done. I also did some fishing by the lake, one of the more tranquil parts of Minecraft, apart from that zombies can still somehow seem to ruin that one too. Day 45. On this day I crafted my next powerful artifact. This was the Stone of the Sea, a lucrative trinket that gave me bonuses to my projectile damage, more uses for slaying dragons with my bow from the skies. But not only that, this beautiful necklace grants you underwater vision, water breathing, drinking water purification, and super fast movement underwater, basically turning you into the Little Mermaid. On this day, those tree folk, aka my neighbours, decided to send a whole tree to try to murder me. Seriously, that thing was huge. I guess they sent the dad round. Floating in the sky, topped off with a sweet waterfall, was a castle keep. I flew up to this thing and it was exactly the same as one of those that I found earlier on in my adventure. Yes, the same farms and structure entirely. Although the interior was a little different, there weren't really any real rooms in the castle. It was just a cesspit of zombies and monsters down below, teasing some floating ore veins in midair, so you know I had to go down there. The layout was frustrating though, as it was made up of both sand, gravel and water. So mining ores made the water leak into the room and sand and gravel drop, leaving a gaping hole leading down below where I could potentially fall through the skies to my death. After raiding the castle, I flew down to a neighbouring castle down below. I wouldn't make the same mistake as before, however, as I saw those mermaids way before they could try to charm me. It was also at this point when I went for a swim that I experienced how awesome the amulet really was. Apparently I hadn't dispatched of all the mermaids though, as I ended up still getting pulled in and being glitched through the wall. Ah, fun times. Next door to the castle, down the water, was a gigantic medieval city, a whole civilization, like the one that I found earlier. And down in the water was a mythical beast going for a skinny dip. Yeah, there was just a cyclops chilling having a paddle. Perhaps it was cruel to kill the guy, but if tables were turned, you know he'd do the same to me. Perhaps it was kind of overkill though. Day 46. I boarded land and set to explore the city, venturing through throne rooms, houses and other rooms alike, stumbling into a nice accumulation of pure emerald blocks adorning one of them, shiny. I climbed up some winding stairs, but apparently whoever owned that place kept demonic spiders as pets, which shot lasers at me like a death ray and killed me in cold blood. There's always a bigger fish. This village was actually populated though, and not just by evil creatures, a ton of villagers lived here, more than what could be said for most of the abandoned structures thus far. There were huge stones of iron to farm, blocks like cauldrons for the taking, and more cool stuff. Back at base, I crafted the reforge station to level up my gear somewhat. This thing allowed recrafting of items to basically gamble the stats on them to try to make them better, requiring ore as an extra input to spend on the upgrade. I played around with this a few times until I got a legendary diamond sword out of it. Now this costs a lot of diamonds to play with. Day 47. I also crafted another similar block called the reforging station, sharing a likened name, but it was a different block. Using this I could do the exact same thing on armor pieces and trinkets to stretch the most out of them as possible, although this worked the best on rings. I crafted another enchantment table, but not for the same purpose this time, but I'd need this later. I also made another anvil. I had gathered a ton of various assorted enchantment books from my travels at this point, so I deemed it necessary to improve some of my weapons and also get rid of some of them in the process. It was either that or I could just throw them in the sea, which I thought was pretty stupid. Using the bronze dragon scales I had collected from felling such a legendary beast, I crafted some stronger armor, dragon scale gear. This was particularly effective against dragons themselves, and it looked absolutely awesome, especially with my necklace. But if I wanted a full set of this stuff, I'd have to find more dragons. In the evening time, I found a mob tower. This one was really strange though, a mystery of sorts, mainly due to the fact that it was absolutely covered in moss all over it and no monsters were even spawning, maybe because of the holes in the structure and the amount of sunlight leaking in. This meant I got free loot with zero effort. Well, until the blood moon began to start and the sun was setting. Well, then things changed accordingly, of course. Around 8 PM, the blood moon had engulfed the sky and it looked beautiful with the aurora borealis behind it, making picturesque views. I flew to the village base below it, looking for a spot to stay for the night. Everywhere outside was dangerous at this point. Now, they say that you shouldn't bite the hand that feeds you, but when you find free stuff, it's kind of hard not to take it. Day 48. I found a gigantic village. It was just like some of the normal NPC villages that I'd seen before, but this place was upgraded like crazy, with huge windmills, watchtowers, and defenses. These guys must have had some serious money. Also, it was pretty creepy that one of the villagers' houses just had a human skull sitting near his table. Okay. Well, this place was really cool, especially their library. They probably had the coolest enchantment table area that I've personally seen. These guys were so clever, they had more than one library. Kind of pointless though. Sitting on the water, I found a black drake. Perhaps this dragon had fallen from the skies, or maybe it was having a bath in the ocean, but it was at its weakest. A flurry of flames flew up to me as I fired arrow upon arrow down on it below. Its wings definitely weren't working, or so it seemed, as it was just gliding on the water, doing some kind of moonwalk back into the mountainside. But alas, it picked up pace and floated toward me, spraying me with its fire breath. With my ice elementals chasing it down, this thing was powerful. It was stronger than the previous ones that I had faced, but I had become more powerful. The predator can become the prey, and as it tried to fly away, I felled the beast to the ground as its corpse hit the mountain. I seeked out this trove of treasure nearby and harvested it for all the bones and golden pieces that buried its charcoal blocks. I had hit the jackpot. I struck gold. I was rich. Metaphorically, of course. Unfortunately, gold doesn't actually have that great of a value in Minecraft. But we're telling a story here, right? Day 49. I sheared the dragon down to the bone and collected its skeleton as a trophy to create into gear later. Somewhere nearby, there was a floating tower of mythical origin, a burning netherrack spire that illuminated in the distance. As if mob towers hadn't become predictable at this point, I decided to embark on more of a challenge. Board a mob tower that actually sat on the ocean. More of a tougher one, I guess, to conquer. This mob tower had some healthy loot inside, loot that wasn't half bad in comparison to my advanced gear that I'd amassed. I dropped the Cyclops boss down a floor and just sniped it through the opening of the wall from my mount. I'd kind of become accustomed at this point to hacking this boss fight. It was just easy loot at this point, and once more I was rich in diamonds again. Simple as that. Day 50. The beginning of this day was just reconnaissance, picking up some of the loot that had dropped and been left behind from my previous day of conquest. Now, I must say the desert biome is definitely a treacherous place, and pretty crazy at that. With flying sandstorms, crazy hawks and ghosts, sea serpents and sandworms, this place is definitely not for the weak-hearted. I was finding that even as a seasoned adventurer like me, who'd been through some stuff, I was having a hard time here, and who knew mermaids liked the desert? After some challenging dogfights in midair, sniping down monsters, or at least trying, I scoped out the pyramid down below, making a narrow escape from an obviously placed lava trap. Phew. I boarded a grand ship, another pirate ship. Just like Blackbeard's, this ship was impressive, but unlike Blackbeard's, it actually had a steering wheel. It also was littered with the skulls of both skeletons and nether skeletons, so I imagined maybe the good guys owned this one. So the likelihood of it being another ghost ship or being occupied by the undead was seemingly low. Well, rest assured, the ship's hull was littered with zombies and skeletons. Looks can be deceiving. The cannons on this thing were pretty awesome though. The ship was immense in stature and it had 2 additional floors to its hull, with the lowest housing all of the chests of loot. Now, pirates don't always have treasure, but the iron armor set I found had rich lore and history to it, and it enticed me the most. Also, the third mate on the bird's nest, serving as a lookout, was another one of those trumpet skeletons. I figured that was important to mention, at least just for the memes. I found a desert temple, similar to the pyramid, but smaller in size and less exciting. It was filled with weird winged angel things that played beautiful songs, but tried to viciously murder me. And as I said before, looks can be deceiving, gentlemen. I carefully meandered my way down into the base of the structure, dodging any traps, although I might add the loot was quite anticlimactic. Day 51. The bronze drake of the desert plains crawled menacingly across the sand, setting a light to every block around it and coming for my head. But somehow it took a while for it to actually kill me, even at point blank range. Ah, sweet, sweet revenge. Luckily, my magical ice bodyguards don't die when I do, so I returned to see the dragon dead in the sand, or at least it looked that way. Turns out it was actually sleeping. Oops. I hid in a small hut, and as it took off to the skies, I made my great escape. I was hoping to gather some serpent scales to get some tough armor, but it didn't really go my way, unfortunately. Those barrel rolls, where did they learn it from, man? In the desert sand stood a beautiful city, the city of Babylon, a true sight to be seen on the water. The farmers had rich potatoes and beets and some nice crops for me. They're always so kind. There was also a big stone head with one of those huge noses, like those famous Maui heads on that Chilean island. Anyways, it looked cool, but there was really nothing more to it to see. I also found a Mongolian deathworm in the sand. Those things are cute, but also equally disgusting. Bronze dragons always seem to be the ones that I had the most luck with, which is probably why I tried my luck at killing another. If I was to be known as the Dragonborn, I had to actually kill more than one dragon. After all, this thing was picking on a nearby town and they needed a hero. My problem is fighting up close. Because I was a failure and because I guess I wanted to feel better about myself, I went to kill another golem at a battle tower, and that didn't go my way either. Day 52. I crafted a disenchantment table. This was an awesome block which I could use to separate any magical enchantments on gear that I didn't want or need to then put on a book to use on gear that I actually wanted later. For an example, I could strip an iron pickaxe with silk touch and get a silk touch enchantment book and an unenchanted iron pickaxe, and then apply that enchant onto a diamond tool. Comprende? I used this thing on a bunch of useless items that I didn't need so I could enchant my current gear with their nice bonuses. I burrowed deep down into a dungeon below ground. This place was littered with rooms and I even found cake. No, the cake is in fact not a lie. The greatest gaming mystery of all time has now been solved. Thank me later. Day 53. I continued to progress through the structure, finding so much loot. This place has so many different floors to it. It went on seemingly forever, deeper and deeper. The rooms deep down in the abandoned mine portion of this structure had powerful boss zombies, armored villager zombies, and a ton of difficult, challenging enemies. This place was a true labyrinth, and it was actually pretty interesting, but it got quite repetitive, so we'll just glaze over that for now. Day 54. I crafted a dragon scale helmet from some of my remaining scales. I was literally wearing a dragon's head on my head. Kinda nasty if you think about it, but somehow it looked awesome. Day 55. I was attacked by a pack of wild wolves. Wargs. Strange, my spirit animal was always a wolf. I guess I proved I was the alpha by killing them all though. Sorry guys. In a riverside village, a serpent was squirming in the water. Maybe the current had dragged him into stasis, and anyway, these guys were tough to kill, so I took advantage of it to get some scales. I found a boulder upon the sea. It looked like Patrick's house of SpongeBob, but this one housed something more sinister. Anyway, turns out this guy was good with the ladies. He had some mermaid girls chilling with him on a nearby rock. Mermaids that pulled me into his lair to probably get me killed. Inside was the Cyclops himself. We'll call him Jimmy, but Jimmy wasn't one of those Ponzi Cyclopses on top of the battle towers. This dude was a big boy, so big that he had a skeleton of some huge monster in his lair that he'd probably already eaten already. This guy was serious business, and I wasn't killing one of them who was going for a swim like earlier, so this guy was alert, and I had to get up close and personal. I had to kill his mermaids though, because they were really getting irritating. Sorry girls. I returned to the Cyclops' lair, where I guess my magical servants had finished dispatching of the beast. This guy had a ton of shears in some chests. I guess he needed that many. He had some pet sheep though, which was kind of cute in his stable, and since he had shears as I guess he didn't want to kill them, so was he surviving on a diet of wool? Who knows? Who cares? I found a red serpent in the sea near his base though. For some reason the red serpents were weaker or not as acrobatic or something. They didn't seem to do as many flips as the others. I guess they didn't receive the same circus training. They were just AFK at the bottom of the water, mostly like those NPCs that you just see at the mall on weekends. Now that's confidence for you. Using some dragon treats that I had created earlier, here's one I made earlier, I tamed a Morok, a type of dragon different to the drakes that I usually killed. This guy was stronger than the rock, so unfortunately I had to kiss my sweetheart goodbye and chill with a new babe, especially if I wanted to have higher chances in the skies in my next showdown, because dragons were not getting any easier. I used the soul stone like before, taming another creature called the Quetzalcoatl, which was similar to the rock also, but a lot stronger too. Day 56. With diamond armor, these things looked awesome. I now took to the skies in confidence. I crafted a dragon bone strengthened longbow, blowing my diamond one out of the water, enchanting it with things like rapid fire, range, and infinity, which actually makes it genuinely really overpowered. It was now time. I returned to the ice dragon's mountain. As he sat atop the peak, I let out a flurry of arrows, firing over and over, but he was already dead. Was I this powerful already? I took some glass bottles from my base and filled it with ice dragon blood before stripping the monster of its bones. The blood was a valuable fluid that I could further use later for gear. Day 57. I found another Cyclops' lair. He barely flinched as I shot him between the eyes. Wait, he really does look like Patrick Star, right? As usual, this guy had some affinity for shears and kept the same troop of sheep as pets. Poor guy. I guess this one didn't have mermaids and was lonely though. Not a Chad Cyclops like the former one that we killed. I zoomed through the skies to an autumnal forest ablaze. A dark dragon, a black drake stood dousing it in fire. But this time I had come equipped, adorned in dragon body armor, using the bones of such a beast as my weapon against it. I felled him too. I was now a dragon slayer, a seasoned one at that. The Dovahkiin, Dragonborn. Fuss, row. Okay, that's enough. So with my remaining bottle, I harvested it for its fire dragon blood. I took the tomes and scripture from its roost and all of its other treasures and dipped on out of there, leaving behind its bones. I enchanted some of my other armor, like my leggings and dragon scale boots, with some of my remaining enchantments. I also crafted a more powerful dragon sword than the previous one that I had, the one I most likely lost earlier somehow. I crafted the dragon bone greatsword. In retrospect, it probably wasn't the best idea since it was a two-hander and I couldn't use a shield with it, but it did more damage and was more powerful. Big guys need big weapons, if you know what I mean. Moving on. This thing definitely looked imposing once I threw an enchant on it. Day 58. Can we stop to just appreciate how funny the spiders look when they jump? Look at these guys, you'd think they were dancing to the sweet, sweet tune of one of those trumpet skeletons or something. I crafted some Eyes of Ender and set out to try at least to find a stronghold. It'd be tough and time consuming, but it'd be something to do. On another pirate ship, I dived into the water, killing another sea serpent. Slaying these things was almost a breeze now, especially at range. It's crazy to think how hard it was before. Ah, humble beginnings. Underwater here, there was also a hidden dungeon filled with those guardian creatures, which was really cool. With underwater breathing and an abundance of bandages, it was quite nice to just browse through the chest here, carefree. But the raids of those guardians do get annoying after a while, especially when you realize that the neighboring rooms were full of elder guardians too. Day 59. On day 18, for some reason I bullied a lot of dinosaurs and I really don't know why. Most of them were herbivores too and did absolutely nothing wrong to me. It was kind of fun to throw javelins at them though, I won't lie. Something tells me I was procrastinating a little though, as I reverted back to my pig slaying tendencies too. People never change, huh? But it was on this epic day that the tables would turn as I burrowed below the sand and surfed my way down into a stronghold. Somehow directly into the portal room too actually. Talk about a stroke of luck. I hate silverfish with a passion. Fun fact, they're really not that big in real life, just saying. Now was that point in time where I placed the ender eyes and tried to push them in the right position, you feel? Well, it worked the first time. Not lying. As I dived into the portal below, I reached a barren land. I was entrapped in a prison of seemingly blocks of cheese or moon rock. I mined out the stone and held my breath for what was to come ahead. Now, the end was not exactly how I remembered in the tales. Not only were there perhaps 1,000 other monsters and demons coming for my head, but, well, you get the idea. The towers looked different too, with an enderman head on one of them. I sailed the skies with my new mount, being struck by balls of purple flames by the monster. Vodaving paled in comparison comparison to this beast. In fact, I set my sights on this dragon being the end boss. This was the legendary Ender Dragon, the most mythical and powerful of them all, an interdimensional dragon that watched over the balance of the space-time continuum, and this would be my most cumbersome task yet, my final task. Day 60. On my mount, one by one, I would break each and all of the glass prism crystals that would feed her power. She would become weaker each time, ready for my next move. It was a tricky task. It would take many arrows, perfect handling of my mount, and clever avoidance of all of the doom and gloom and danger of the monsters below, her minions that would sought to protect her. But with a final strike, she fell from the skies, being swallowed by the energy of the universe and dropping her wisdom and power below. As I absorbed it all from the beast's soul, I too became more powerful in turn, but her scales were my most sought after prize, and I had now acquired them. I will go down in legend and stories to come.